Law 21. How many of you just probably thought Jesus would come first? Now, what's going to tick us off is if we really learn these laws and then he comes. The 21st law of leadership, the law of legacy. A leader's lasting value is measured by succession. Max Dupree, who is, I would encourage you to read anything that Max Dupree writes in leadership. He's a very good leadership writer. He wrote a book called Leadership is an Art that was a very good book. But if Max Dupree wrote it, it's good. Max Dupree said that succession is one of the key responsibilities of leadership. So let me tell you a story. Let me then do a little teaching, and then let me tell you one more story. As you know, I speak for Promise Keepers, and probably of all the things I've ever done in my life, the thing that it probably means the most to me was a couple of years ago in Atlanta at Promise Keepers Conference. I spoke to 41,000 pastors in the Georgia Dome. And there were about 10 of us that were speaking over 3 days. And to be able to speak to 41,000 pastors, more pastors than any other group that's ever gathered in the history of mankind, and to be one of the 10 on the team to be able to do that was a huge honor. And so when it came my time to speak, there were a couple things I wanted to do. And one of it was the fact that my father, who's been in the ministry now for 53 years, my dad was a great man. He planted 40 churches in his lifetime. He was a college president. He was a wonderful pastor. He's still going strong. He's just a godly man. When I got up to speak that day, my father happened to be there, and I wanted to honor him. I was going to preach on faithfulness anyway. And so when I got up to speak, I told the rest of the pastors, I said, my dad is here. My dad's been in ministry for so many years. And I said, I just want to honor him. And I said, I know the dome is full of people, and I know you won't even be able to see him, but he's over to my right, and he was over in that section to my right. And so I said, Dad, I just want you to know I love you. You're my hero. When I get older, I want to be just like you. You're a godly leader. You're a wonderful example. And I said, I just want you to stand. And when my dad stood, these 41,000 pastors, they were very kind. They clapped and they cheered, and I'm clapping and I'm cheering, and I can see my dad. I can see my dad because he's maybe 30 yards away from me, but I can see him, and he's smiling and he's waving to the people. He's a very humble man. He's a godly man. And so we clapped for a pretty good time. In fact, kind of an inordinate amount of time, and I thought, okay, I got to get back to my message. And so I turned away from my dad, and when I did, I happened to look up on the big screen in the dome, the big screen where they do all the replays and things. And what I didn't realize is, while I was honoring my dad, the Promise Keepers media team, which is outstanding, got their camera crew over there, and they had my dad on the big screen so everybody could see him. And when I looked up, I saw my dad looking like an angel to me. And I just lost it, and I just said, oh, man, wow. How many sons get to honor their fathers in front of their father's colleagues? It was the single most important ministry moment of my life. And then I thought of all the other pastors out there that have been very faithful to God. And I got an idea, and this was kind of like on the spur of the moment idea. And I said, if you're 65 or older and you've spent your lifetime in the ministry, I want you to stand, and we want to honor you, and we want to recognize you. And all over the dome, hundreds of men who had been faithful to God stood up, and we clapped and we cheered, and the rest of them were giving them standing ovations. And it was one of those moments I'll never forget. There was just a huge appreciation going on. And in fact, Max Lucado is a great friend of mine. Max told me, he said, John, he said, let me tell you a story. He told me this later. He said, when you asked for the older pastors to stand, he said, on my staff in San Antonio, he said, I have my whole staff there. I have an elderly pastor who's really been faithful to God. And he said, when you ask him to stand, he stood up, and he said, the rest of my staff got around him and got under him and put him on their shoulders and raised his hand like a champion boxer. And he said, John, to this day, he still talks about that moment where he was honored in the Atlanta Dome. And when I got done speaking that day, I had to go do radio, TV, all kind of interview stuff. And so they whip you out the back, and you're going up into another part of the dome where the suites are, where they're doing the interviews. And as I walk in through the hallway, a man that was 85 called my name. I didn't know him at all, but he called my name. I turned around, and he came up, and this elderly man from South Dakota just hugged me and wept. And when he kind of got a hold of himself, he looked at me and said, John, let me tell you something. He said, I wanted to come to this pastor's gathering because all my life I've been doing ministry. But he said, I'm old now, and I don't have a valid or a very important ministry at all. But he said, I just wanted, because I love preachers, he said, I decided to come. And he said, I drove myself all the way from South Dakota. And he said, all the way down, the devil just kept hammering on me. Why are you going down there? And your days are over, and you've had your shot at this. And why are you doing this? And you're going to be out of place. And he said, John, I came down because I just wanted to be with pastors. And he said, but today when you ask for the pastors who've been in ministry for these years to stand, he said, when I stood, he said, the guys around me clapped and cheered. And he said, now I know why I came to the conference. I came because God wanted to affirm me in front of my conference. Man, now I'm crying and hugging on to him and holding on to him and loving him. Now I want to teach this, so I have to be very careful here. Life is not a 100-yard dash. It's a relay race. And I'm just one of a whole chain of leaders. And what that means is that I have to do my best to run the best race I can for God and for the kingdom. But at best, when I'm done with my section, I'm going to hand the baton off to someone else. And I need to prepare myself to be the best that I can be, but I also need to realize that when I get to the end, they don't stand up and cheer for me. That's not the way this works. The way this works is we pass the baton off to another generation. That we raise up a new generation of leaders. And in any relay race, they'll tell you, coaches will tell you, that there's about a 20-yard space in a relay race where they hand off the baton. It's called the exchange zone. And they'll tell you that races are won and lost, not on the speed of the runners individually, but the race is going to be run by the team that can best hand off the baton to the next guy in the cleanest, the quickest exchange possible, so that the next runner can get that little tenth of a second edge over the other runners to win the race. Now, what that means to me is my race is an important race, but it's not the only race. So what that means is that I have to run well and run fast and be faithful and keep focused. But what it really means is I've got to hand the baton off. I've got to pass it on to another generation. I've got to pass it off to another leader. I've got to raise someone else. If I don't have anybody to pass the baton off, the race will surely be lost. So if you'll let me fill in the blanks and close with this story. Achievement comes when somebody is able to do great things for himself. We get recognized for achievement. We get trophies and medals. Success comes when he empowers followers to do great things with him. Significant comes when he develops leaders to do great things for him. But legacy comes when he raises his organization to do great things without him. And this is where we want to go. We want to raise our churches, our organizations, to go beyond us. We want to realize that we're just part of a moving picture, And that we want to, when we leave our church or when we leave our company or our business, we want to leave it in such a way that there's a legacy, that it goes on, that it improves. We don't want to leave it like I left my first church at Hillham. We don't want to leave it and have it fall apart. We want to leave it and have it flourish. So let me close with a story and a letter, and I'm done. In 1981, when I went to San Diego, California to pastor that church, I was committed to raising up an equipping church. I walked into the lives of the people and I told them, my job is to work my way out of a job. My job is to equip you, and so I pretty much went in there and said, I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to teach you how to do it. Now here's the good news, I'll do it with you until you learn how to do it. And then you're going to turn around and you're going to teach someone else to do it also. When I arrived at that church, it had been plateaued for 11 years. Out of 1,000 people that attended, there were 112 people that had a weekly ministry in the church. So I began talking about spiritual giftedness. I began to teach them about their responsibility to grow as a person and to find out their spiritual gift and use it for the glory of God. We began to give the spiritual gift test. We went through the whole process. We began to develop leadership training. I began to train my staff in leadership. I began to train my board in leadership. We began to train potential leaders. We discipled. Bill, I don't know. We had, at one time at Skyline, we had over 700 laymen who were discipling other laymen one-on-one. And we spent all of our time developing people. In fact, I would laugh and I would tell the congregation, there's a day that I want to have equipped you so well that I can just take Margaret by the hand and we can kind of slip out and we can leave. And about 6 months later, you'll look at somebody and say, you know, somebody's missing from this church. And so I would in a very kind of laughing way, I would tell them, I'm really here to equip you. And when it comes to time, I'm going to slip out. I'm here to work myself out of a job. After 14 years, and I felt the call to this national ministry so strong. When the time was right on a Sunday, I stood up and I resigned. And when I finished that resignation time, tears all over the place. Bill, my prayer partner, came up and put his arms around me and he prayed a prayer. And the first part of the prayer, when he prayed it, the people cracked up. He puts his arm around me. I've just resigned and told him I'm going to be leaving. And his first few words as he puts his arm around me is, dear God, John's worked himself out of the job. But that's what I did. That's what I did. And now my church board, they weren't sure. They said, oh no, I think you ought to stay a few more. No, I said, the time's right. And I said, you don't need me. Trust me, you don't need me. You're better than you think you are. You don't realize how good you are. You really can lead. You don't need me. And after I left the church for a couple of months, I was at the Brigantine one day and I was having lunch with just a couple of my ex-board members. We were just having a good time. And they said, oh, John, the church is doing so good. Oh, I mean, John, since you left, attendance is up. Offerings are up. Baptisms are up. Finances are up. Oh, John, you were so right. We don't need you. In fact, John, if we'd have known what we know today, you could have left a couple of years ago. Oh, it made me so happy. Because that's exactly what I wanted. I want to leave a legacy. A few weeks ago, I was out there. I've been able to go back a couple times because the pastor, Jim Garlow, who's done a great job, asked me to come back. He asked me to come back when we raised money. We went down to the convention center, and in one evening, we raised $7.8 million. And by the way, it was a great evening. I knew it would be a great evening. Morale was high. And so I told Margaret before we went to the convention center, I said, now listen, babe, this isn't our church. These aren't our people. So what we're going to do is I'm going to speak, and I'll do all the stuff that Jim wants me to do for him. But I said, when it's done, when they bow their head for the closing prayer, you take my hand, we're slipping out. So when the people are done praying, the only person there that will receive the praise from the people is the pastor, Jim Garlow. It's not my church. I can still remember holding her hand and slipping out that evening and getting us in the back of a car, and they were whisking us off to an airport for us to go to catch a plane. I had to go somewhere to another leadership conference the next morning. And I can remember looking over at her, and she's sitting in the back, and the tears are just streaming down her faces because we're seeing the success of the ministry. And when they broke ground, Jim was excited, said, John, you want to come out? We're going to break ground. And I thought about it, and I wanted to come out, and then I thought, no. So I told him, I said, no, Jim, I'm not coming back for this. Oh, he said, John, you raised millions of dollars. This was the day you were looking for, to break ground. The bulldozers are out there. I said, no. I said, Jim, this needs to be your day. You need to really lock your leadership in. And I said, I think I'll just stay away today. And I did, and it was the right decision. And they had a great day. My daughter, Elizabeth, who lives out in San Diego, she kind of represented me and had the shovel and helped do the little dirt deal type of thing. But I went out a couple weeks later, and Jim said, let's go out and look at the property. So I went out and looked at the property and the bulldozers and everything, and they're scraping, and it was so much fun, and it was great to see. But I want to close because I'm talking about the law of legacy. A few days after the groundbreaking, Jim Garlow sent me this letter. And I think that this says it all, and when I'm done, I think I'm done. Dear John, we just had our groundbreaking service, and it was fabulous. I wish you could have been here. Construction has finally begun. It was truly a joyous day. He said, as I reflect on the groundbreaking, I want to thank you for the legacy that you've left behind. He said, I inherited a very healthy church from you, and there are several very specific things for which I am so grateful to you. The first item for which I am grateful is the prayer partner ministry. Listen to this, Bill. I have told people several times that I believe that this is the greatest legacy that you left. I have listened to your preaching tapes in which you refer to your prayer partners with endearing terms, and I understand why. It's a great thrill to meet them 15 minutes before the first service and have them pray over me. They are always such an encouragement. I would hate to think of walking onto the platform to preach without the prayer partners praying before and during each of our 4 worship services. Secondly, I'm immensely grateful for the legacy of fun that you left. Your sense of humor, along with the founding pastor Over Butcher's spirit of bubbling joy, laid a foundation for which I am so grateful. Some churches are stodgy, some are uptight, some take themselves too seriously. Skyline is simply fun. What a place to be. The third significant legacy of which you left is the spirit of resiliency. I doubt that there's a church in America that has had to wait 15 years to start construction. More taxing than the 15 years is the fact that $7 million has been spent trying to get to this point before the first shovel of dirt actually turned. Most would have given up and most would have left, but the congregation is resilient. They've hung together, and the result is that we are now under construction. Thank you for your spirit of resiliency that you placed in the soul of Skyline. The next legacy that I appreciate so much is focus. There is an intensity of focus on Skyline, and the focus is very simple. We want to produce passionate followers for Jesus. And John, it is written in the very fabric of this church. Thank you for that clarity of focus. The final legacy means most to me personally. You've just simply helped me. Your counsel has been invaluable. You have 14 years of perception. You've been like an older brother to me. Remember, you are much older than me. 2 months. You have consistently beamed a message to the people that he's my pastor. And thereby you've sent a signal that you were going to support me. And I never once, in almost 3 years that I've been here, had to deal with the problem of you preempting my role as a new pastor here. You have been profoundly affirming. Every time I run into someone who references hearing you speak, they always tell me that how much you have said publicly about believing in me. I'm so thankful for the times that you took me to Padres games and we just sat there and laughed. You helped me to chill out. There isn't a pressure that I felt, but what that you understood it. There wasn't a single frustrating challenge, but what you understood it in a way that perhaps no one else in the whole world could. And you seemed to sense that I needed to get away, so off to the Padre games we went. We hardly watched the games because I laughed so hard at your jokes. Thank you for helping me to chill out when I would have otherwise been way too uptight. Now, I know this last legacy won't sound significant to others, but to me it's been profound. Thank you for the legacy you left, a grateful successor, Jim Garlow. And then he put a P.S. There's one more legacy that I'm thankful for at least 1 month. I have heard you say repeatedly that a pastor could blame his problems on the previous pastor for his first 3 years. After 3 years, you can't blame your predecessor anymore. They're the new pastor's problems. Well, John, I've been here at Skyline for 2 years and 11 months. So when anything goes wrong, I just say, it's John's fault. Sounds better than blaming it on El Nino or Ken Starr, right? Well, I can only do that for 1 more month because on October the 15th, I will have been the pastor here for 3 years. I have a favor to ask. Can I get an extension?
John C. Maxwell is one of America's most popular teachers of leadership and management. And through the innovative techniques and powerful skills described in his best-selling book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, John can help you be a better leader in virtually any situation. The Nelson Word Multimedia Group brings you this powerful seminar series captured live on video and in a comprehensive audio cassette format. Either could easily be the most effective teaching system you will ever use. You'll learn effective mentoring, training techniques, and specific applications to help you achieve greater success in any profession, whether you're a teacher, business person, lay person, or a pastor. The video series puts you in a front row seat for John's dynamic live presentation, and the audio series guides you through a personal study course taught by John himself. It's supported by a student manual, a reference book, and an accompanying orientation video, giving you a year-long comprehensive learning experience. Your library will not be complete without both the video and audio programs. And watch for additional products based on John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.